And again, I was the trader, and there's behind every great trader is a great quant. And sometimes it's not obvious who's actually making the decisions. You know? Sometimes
depends on the strategy.
The trader always likes to think that they're making the decisions, but oftentimes it's based on what the quants are doing. And if we didn't have our research team, we couldn't price all of our complicated options, even though we probably took credit for the P&L more than we should. What did you learn, big takeaway lesson from your time on Wall Street? How long were you there? And as you look back on it now, did you learn some important things that even helped on the Tezos journey?
Yeah, I mean, like, first of all, just like a good understanding of finance. Like how does it work? How does financial instruments work? Just like, the basics. And sometimes you think some stuff is just undergrad, basic financial theory, but there's a very big difference between having studied this stuff and maybe like taking an exam and living and breathing it and just, like having it as a second nature, like just understanding it deeply enough that when you're presented with a product or a pattern, you can say like, oh, that's not going to work, and here's why.
Yeah, and under pressure with P&L and positions.
Yeah. So this type of reflexes. I learned a lot about finance, about derivatives, products, microstructure. I would say in general, financial economics. I like a lot of the thing that I like about finance, especially if you look at the high frequency, that it's very, very much no bullshit, because immediately if especially with high frequency, immediately if you're wrong. Now, if you're someone and you say like, I'm a macro trader and here's what oil is going to do over the next 20 years, how many times are going to be proven right or wrong? Whereas if you have a view and it's going to be validated in the next day, you're going to know who's right, you're going to know who's wrong. So a lot of the economics that you find in financial papers is very verifiable. There's a lot of concrete evidence for it. It's very, very solid. And then as you move to microeconomics, it becomes a little less solid, but it's still, very, very principled. And then you go to macro and it's kind of like free floating because it doesn't have this contact with reality.
Yeah, the contact reality is what Wall Street's very good at. I took a bunch of classes at the Sloan School of Management in futures and options.
Yeah.
And then I remember I tried to get a summer job at Bankers Trust, and I called one of the traders up on the phone who was an MIT grad. And I could hear people yell in the background, and I said, "Hi, my name is Brian. I'd love to get a job." And she just barked down the phone. She said, "What's the delta of an at-the-money call option?" Okay. Now, I'm 21 years old, and I'm at MIT, and I just studied maybe a one options course. And I was like, and she literally was like, "Answer me." Like, I talked to her like a minute, like a trader. And I said, one, which is completely wrong.
One half.
It's one half. One half. And any idiot would know that. But the thing is that it's one thing to study finance at Sloan, but on a trading floor, you'll learn that real quick, or someone will slap you, or the P&L will hit you. And so, like you said, Wall Street is where the rubber hits the road, and you get to find out what's in theory and what's in practice, right?
The other thing I've learned, and I'm reluctant to share that because if you're looking at it on the other side, it just, what I'm going to say, I make it sound so obvious. And you say like, well, you're an idiot. You should have known that from the get-go. But a lot of people make that mistake, is just how competitive markets are. Everyone and their mothers think that, markets are not efficient. You can beat the markets very easily, yada. And over the years, I've had people saying like, oh, look, I have, the strategies that I backtested, look, it works, and so on and so forth. And there's just so much work between a strategy that kind of looks good on paper, and you're actually trying to run it, and then you find that there's transaction costs, and then you find all of this, and so on and so forth. And if you've not really tried it, it's very easy to convince yourself of like, if I use this new technique or new statistical technique and so on and so forth, it's going to, and it doesn't work. And what you realize is that there's a lot of very, very high tech in finance, but because it's so competitive, it's a lot more secretive than tech. People don't publish. Yeah. So you have a lot of very advanced stuff that's being done. You have some of the smartest people in the world who are being hired, and no one talks about it because it's a competitive advantage. Yeah. So just from the outside, it's very easy to not realize how incredibly competitive it is and how incredibly efficient the markets are, especially on the short run.